Hey, welcome back to another week of the Idaho Outfitters and Guides Association podcast. I'm Erik Weiseth,
And I'm Jack Hurty.
and we have a full episode today. So first, our interview is going to be with Eric Barker from the Lewiston Tribune. Probably, I would say Idaho's preeminent outdoor journalist, and
Definitely.
has been for a long time. Great interview that Jack did. Just kind of fun to hear his perspective, having been around Idaho and the outdoor industry and outdoor recreation for so long. Just kind of gave some great big picture context. We're also going to be chatting about changes to the definition of harm under Section 9 of the Endangered Species Act, which is a fun one. The proposal to return grizzly management to the states. Representative Russ Fulcher is looking for feedback on how he should feel about public lands, so that's a fun one. The U.S. Forest Service is asking if they should toss out the handbook. Idaho Fish and Game named the replacement for Brad Compton on the Outfitters and Guides Licensing Board. We'll talk about DOT regs for outfitters and a guide that we just made to help folks understand that. The Salmon Chalice is looking for RAC members to help say where SRS funding goes. And finally, we're going to end on a fun note. You can be the artist to have your rendition of Geronimo the Beaver jumping out of a plane on Idaho Fish and Game's hard licenses next year.
Nice.
So, but yeah, let's go ahead and jump on in. Jack, do you want to start with the Endangered Species Act of all
Yeah.
places?
Yeah. So there's been a couple of, I think, pretty big moves with the Endangered Species Act in the last week or so. So the first one of those is that U.S. Fish and Wildlife and NOAA Fisheries have finalized their rescission of the regulatory definition of harm, which is in Section 9 of the Endangered Species Act to exclude habitat modification. So what does that mean? So the Endangered Species Act prohibits, doing a bunch of things to wildlife, including killing it, harassing it, um, and then harming it has been one of the things. And that word's pretty vague. So when the law came out, the agencies went and wrote a definition of harm, and that definition historically has included habitat modification that could indirectly kill or injure wildlife. So think like doing trail work where you're dumping dirt into a creek or like doing logging work that might, you know, harm some habitat for grizzly bear or wolf or something like that. So now they finalized this rule change and taken that completely out. Well, I think what's important to note here is that there's most of the ESA is still in place and remains unchanged. So Section 7 of the ESA requires the agencies to do their consultation. That's probably what people are most familiar with, where the agencies have to go, if the Forest Service is doing a project, they have to go to Fish and Wildlife and get them to basically say that the project's going to be okay and that it's not going to put a given species in jeopardy of going extinct. It doesn't affect the critical habitat designation, so the agencies are still going to be required to designate and then protect critical habitat. Really, what this affects is kind of the incidental take permits and the liability for killing or harming an animal indirectly. So now, your incidental take permit will just cover, an affirmative action that like actually kills a specific animal, not kind of incidental habitat effects. Um, it's kind of one of those things that it's hard, I think, for me at least to wrap your brain around and understand what it's actually going to change. I know, Eric, you wrote the blog post that we put up about it. What's your take? Like, how impactful is this actually right now for outfitters?
So, yeah, I think for outfitters and guides, I've kind of spent some time trying to get my head around this because at first I was like, oh, this is a big deal. And the more I read about it and the more I try to understand it, the more I think it's probably not that big of an impact for outfitters and guides as far as how it's going to impact your day to day interactions with your permits or the reviews that they have to go through to authorize certain types of uses, ESA consultation, because all of that happens under Section 7. I really don't think there's a huge impact here on how that all plays out. It might have sort of a tangential impact in that consultation as far as what they authorize, don't authorize, or say is okay, don't say is okay. Like I could see that playing out down the road, but they still have to go through the consultation process. And the vast majority of that is going to be unchanged.
Hmm.
So, yes, this is a thing. It does remove some liability from, if you're proven down the road to accidentally impact some endangered species through some sort of, like, your trail got too close to a den of a mothering whatever and they moved off somewhere else, which then caused them to die. Like, I mean, there's those kinds of things. But in the day to day of it all, from a permitting standpoint, I don't think this makes a big impact on our industry. This to me feels more like something for mining logging where there's going to be impacts,
Hmm.
or not impacts, but uh, change some of the standards they're held to or whatever. I don't really know, but
Yeah,
that's my immediate takeaway
I think that's
in the
right.
big
And
picture.
it's worth noting that like your existing permit is still in effect. So any mitigation measures you have to do right now are not going to change unless and until renew that permit and maybe redo your consultation, um, stuff like that. I really think
Well,
this is going to have more of an effect on like ranching, especially private land ranching, private land timber, stuff like that.
yes,
Yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah, and that's, I think, a really good point, Jack. Nothing under your current permit changes. And the reality is, even when they reissue your permit, unless they have to re-go through consultation because something changed, none of that's going to change either.
Yeah.
So I don't see in this space, from my understanding, what this does today anyway, at least where they're going today with this, that you should anticipate any big changes.
Yep.
So if you want a more detailed description other than my sort of blabbering through it, or you want to understand kind of the legal justifications, whatever, we do have a blog post up on the website talking about it. There'll be a link to it in the most recent newsletter that has probably come out by the time you're hearing this.
Yep. And as always, if you're confused, talk to your permit administrator. Um, Cool. Next thing, and this I think is a little more clear, although you know, this is just announced, so we're not sure exactly where it's going to go. But the other day, the Department of Interior, so Secretary Burgum, as well as Fish and Wildlife, and the governors from Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho got together to announce a proposed change to how grizzly bears are managed. So they did a press event. In Montana. It got a lot of headlines, but basically, what they want to do is they're going to transfer some management authority to the states. They're changing what's called the 4D rule, which is a part of the Endangered Species Act that lets Fish and Wildlife kind of tailor the protections for a threatened species, not an endangered species, but threatened, right? There's a difference. And hand more day-to-day management flexibility to the states, especially in the areas where bear populations have hit their recovery marks. So, still going to be listed, still staying on the endangered species list, but the state's going to have a little bit more authority. So, that's kind of the shift we're talking about. Obviously, this is pretty important to outfitters across the Intermountain West, but in Idaho, a lot of our folks are operating in grizzly country, or in places where bears aren't established right now, but could be as population expands and bears start walking into those areas. So if you're in that country, it's good to understand how those conflicts are going to get handled, how the state management might change things. Um, and right now, the details, a lot of that flexibility management changes are really on the table, and they're going to open up public comment. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. The public comment period for this change should open up tomorrow, and we should also kind of get more information on the final or what they're actually proposing here. And then that comment period will be open for about 30 days. So think mid-August. Uh, Fish and Wildlife is also under a court deadline to finalize their grizzly rules by the end of the year or by December. So this comment window actually could be a real opportunity to influence that. Um, yeah, Fish and Wildlife's going to hear about this from a lot of advocacy groups on both sides of the spectrum. Whether you have the extremely pro-grizzly people on one side and the extremely anti-grizzly people on the other side. I think what they might not hear is from people who are actually like working in grizzly habitat. They might hear from some ranchers, but having, real suggestions and real experiences from outfitters will go a long way with this. That perspective carries a lot of weight with the agency. So we'll be putting together some of our comments as an association, and we can share those out, so people can reference them. We'll also put the direct comment link in the newsletter, the next newsletter probably, as soon as the rule is formally published. So if you've got field experience, if you have strong opinions about how bear country should be managed, reach out to us, let us know so we can put those in our comments, or write your own comments and put those up there because I do think it's going to go a long way. So keep an eye out for that. That's something that's coming down the pipe that we want to definitely engage with.
Yeah, today's the 16th. We're recording this on the 16th, and they're saying that public comment or that the actual proposed rule should get posted on the 17th.
Yeah.
So, right now we're all kind of talking about this from basically what was said at that presser, and we haven't actually seen what the proposed rule is. So it's too early to really know what the details of this are going to be and how it's going to play out because there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
One of which is being a rule, there's always a risk that this could swing the other way under a different administration and that you can actually have kind of the cascading, like it just going to like you get the pendulum swinging and all of those kinds of things. So we'll know more when we actually see what's being proposed. But as
Yeah.
Jack said, we will have our comment out there for people so they can see that. And if you have an opinion on this, please let us know. And then in the newsletter that's coming out, hopefully tomorrow the 17th, we will have a link to. There's a great article in the Capital Sun, I believe, on this where they really talked about kind of the history, context, everything else that was I found really informative. And I think it is worth talking about like there's a lot to like this is an example of Endangered Species Act kind of working. Bears were down in the where I think they were under 100 or right around 100 is what they
Hmm.
sort of thought there was, and now we're up to a couple thousand. Like, it's a good example of a species coming back. Doesn't
Yep.
mean I don't really have an opinion yet on what we should actually on this specifically, but it is something to recognize as a positive.
Yeah.
So more bears
One
for
more
more
thing to
work.
note that's not on the table with this, to my understanding, is a hunting season. So I don't think that they're proposing to open up grizzly bears for hunting right now. Obviously, that can change as recovery targets are hit in certain areas, but just so people are aware.
Everything I've read highlights that too. That there is no at this point conversation about a hunting season or anything else
Yep.
on that front. So yeah, we'll know more when we actually get to read the proposal. So awesome. Let's see here. Jack, do you want to let people know what Congressman Fulcher is up to?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure people have seen this at least a little bit. Congressman Fulcher has been pretty vocal over the last year on public lands and public land management. I think notably in 2025, he voted for an amendment that was going to sell off some public lands in Utah and Nevada. He's also called the transfer of public lands to the states, quote, imminent and, quote, inevitable. Um, frankly, both things of which I would disagree with, and which the rest of the Idaho delegation has not supported or publicly agreed with at all. That being said, he started to soften his positioning recently. He's kind of started to say that all he wants is more local input to federal land management, that he wants to keep public lands in public hands. When we were in DC in January, I think the first thing he said to us was, "I'm not trying to sell public lands." Um, so to his credit, he's kind of seen the light. Um, Now his team has put out a survey that's looking for input from Idahoans on management, access, and the use of federal lands. It's a pretty long survey. It's actually like very detailed. I think honestly pretty well thought out. There's definitely some questions that you know you might say have a little bit of a biased framing, but by and large, it seems to be a really good faith attempt to understand what Idahoans are thinking about and feeling with public lands. So. This is a really good opportunity for outfitters and guides and people that work on and care about public lands to share their perspective with the Fulcher team, while also demonstrating, our passion for public lands. So we really, really strongly encourage you to take the survey. I just took it this morning. Um, Takes a little bit of time, but it's not too hard to get through. So the survey will be linked in the next newsletter. You can also find it on Congressman Fulcher's website. Should be pretty easy to find. Um, yeah, so go take that survey, kind of get your perspective in there.
Yeah, take the survey. Get your friends to take the survey. Like this conversation that I keep coming back to is when we went to Senator Risch's office last, I think, August. And he kind of relayed to us that when the reconciliation issue came up on selling public lands that Mike Lee tried to do, they got more feedback on that issue by like
Hmm.
multiples than they had on any issue ever. And that really solidified them, gave them kind of the courage to be a leader and really stand up on this issue. And I think this is a real opportunity to put sort of that same message directly into Representative Fulcher's office. But we have to show up and do the thing. So it's really important that outfitters take this survey and get your friends to take the survey. And let's really, you know, make very clear how we think about public lands and how valuable they are.
Yep. And Fulcher's
So
on.
do the
He's
thing.
he's got votes in some pretty relevant committees. I think he's on the House Natural Resource Committee, and I think he's on the subcommittee for public lands. So he's a good person to be able to share, our perspective with because he does have some influence over the process there.
Yeah, and his opinion genuinely seems to be evolving on this, which is
Yeah.
great. I got to talk to him last August, and his perspective was kind of one place, and it seems like it really is changing from that. And so this is an opportunity to continue that in the right direction.
Yep.
All right, on to the next thing. A proposed Forest Service rule published July 1 that, kind of sounds like a pretty basic internal housekeeping, a reorganization of the agency's directive system. Well, it isn't that, or at least that's not where we're sitting today. The rule would keep the Forest Service manual. So if you think about kind of the way things structured in that organization, so line officers and people in the Forest Service know what to do. They have a manual and they have a handbook, and the manual kind of sits above the handbook as their statute, and the manual kind of lays out these big picture things that are in statute, and then the handbook is the how do you actually execute those things. And the handbook has been what has guided Forest Service employees in their decision making process for, I don't know, like ever. Well, this proposed rule would make that handbook essentially voluntary. So the manual stays, you still have to operate within the manual, but that is incredibly broad. And everything in the handbook becomes kind of a do it as you like. You don't have to justify if you deviate from it. You don't have to answer for why. You don't have to be accountable to that really at all. And I think anyone who's worked with the Forest Service understands that sometimes they can be a little rigid and maybe boxed in by their interpretations of the handbook to say no to really common sense things. That is true. And some sort of evaluation of that is absolutely necessary. And if you have a great permit administrator, somebody you really like, someone who is problem solving oriented, everything else, like this could be awesome. But it also would open up the door for Forest Service, like line officers, to kind of do whatever they want in some cases. And that is really concerning. And they're also, the thing we're really diving into right now with America Outdoors is trying to figure out what are the things that we've become really used to or expect or understand, things like permit renewals. Like there's a lot of things, turns out, that we think of as sort of settled, firm, like these are unchangeable things. Well, if they only exist in the handbook and the handbook becomes voluntary, there's now no accountability to those things. And permit renewals and the non competitive nature of those is one of those things that appears to maybe just live in the handbook. So we're going through and trying to figure out what is just in the handbook and what if it goes away is fine, what if it goes away is bad for the industry. And it's kind of a massive project, and public comments on this are due here by the end of the month. So it's something you should definitely be aware of. Check in with America Outdoors, Aaron over there, or me if you have questions or want to participate. But it has the potential to be a big deal in the wrong direction, but also has the opportunity to make some things, I think, more productive in that agency. And we're trying to balance that out and figure out what is where and what we have to make sure we advocate for. So we'll be talking about this more in the future as this evolves, but just know that it is a big deal that's hanging out there.
Yeah, I think, we everyone wants more flexibility for kind of local managers and less bureaucracy, but also you got to have consistency at the same time and without, you know, well-written, kind of defined guidelines, it could be easy for an administrator to go off the rails a little bit, or to have kind of political pressure push them into making bad decisions. So, it kind of protects everyone to have that in place. Um, Moving on, real
Or just
quick.
someone who
Oh,
doesn't like outfitters.
could be that, yeah.
Like if you get a permit administrator who doesn't really like outfitting, which we've seen,
Yeah.
hiding out there, this would open up the door for them to kind of do whatever they wanted potentially in a lot of spaces that could be really harmful to the industry and to the general public ultimately who benefit from outfitting. So it's something we're definitely gonna have to pay attention to.
Yep. Moving on. There's a new appointee to replace Brad Compton on the Idaho Outfitters and Guides Licensing Board. The Fish and Game Commission is recommending Derek Atterbury as its representative for the IOGLB. Just a reminder, the licensing board, assesses and issues outfitter and guide licenses, sets kind of some qualifications, training standards, does enforcement, and then maybe most notably designates capped zone deer and elk tags and how they get divided among outfitters. So definitely someone worth paying attention to. Mr. Atterbury brings about 8 years of experience on the Fish and Game Commission from the Upper Snake region, so he should be very familiar with outfitter tag allocation and some of the other issues around outfitting. He's also an avid hunter, so we look forward to working with Mr. Atterbury going forward, and we'll miss Brad, but happy to have a new partner on there.
Yeah, Brad is irreplaceable in that role, but it is nice to see nomination of somebody who at least has some background and experience around tag allocation, which is a really important part of what the licensing board helps oversee in the designation side of it. So it's complicated, but here's someone with at least some context around it that'll be good. But yeah, as Jack said, look forward to working with Mr. Atterbury on this. And from everybody I hear, I don't know him personally, there's a lot of people who think he'll be a great addition to the licensing board. So, yep. All right. So lately, there's been some outfitters that are dealing with some DOT enforcement issues. And I know when I was an outfitter, I hated dealing with DOT stuff. It was hard to get answers on exactly what I needed. And, oftentimes it felt kind of arbitrary, and I'd even get conflicting information depending on who I was talking to. Then, for a lot of us who've been around, we remember getting this 150-mile circular exemption from certain DOT things, especially if you're crossing state lines. That made a big difference. And, or at least I thought it did, but it turns out I didn't fully understand it and actually how little it helps outfitters who are doing multi-day trips. So we kind of dug deep here recently and spent some time putting together a guide understanding what the DOT requires for outfitters, or specifically oriented towards outfitting businesses where we have gear trucks and we have vans where we drive people and all that kind of stuff, and just try to make it in a simple form. Now, I get that it's July, and honestly, like, I know for me in July, I would have needed it in picture book format for me to probably take it in because I was fried and tired and everything else. It's not quite that simple because the whole issue just simply isn't that simple. But we really did try and frame it into ways that speak directly to the kinds of questions outfitters are going to have, what you need to know, and what you need to do to stay in compliance. So we'll have a link to that in the most recent newsletter that's coming out. You can also find it on the website under the news drop down in the top bar. But go and check that out and just make sure you're operating with, compliant with DOT regulations for what it is that you're doing with your rigs.
Good stuff. Yep. Deeply unsexy, but important.
Oh,
Cool.
so unsexy. It used to drive me insane.
Pun not intended, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Anyways, next up, quick update on the Upper Lochsaw. So if you guys are maybe familiar with that area, there's kind of a lot of checkerboard of private and federal land up there, which is for a long time kind of been a big headache for fire managers, fishery managers. It's also incredible Chinook and steelhead headwater habitat, bull trout and other fish. Um, well, there's now a new initiative moving forward to kind of consolidate some of that land. So Western Pacific Timber is kind of the big landowner up there. They've owned most of that private checkerboard land. They're looking to kind of get out of the land there. They've been kind of looking to get out of it for a while. I think there's been a few things that came up, some land exchanges that were proposed, nothing that really hit home. I know there's some issues with kind of the land exchange rules and how to balance land exchanges. I know there was some kind of local opposition to a land exchange. Um, so finally, there's this new solution called Project Gen 3 that kind of moves some of that private land into federal ownership without doing a land exchange. So Western Pacific is going to sell about 27,000 acres to the Conservation Fund, which is a nonprofit. Conservation Fund will then consolidate that land into Forest Service ownership. They're also going to set up a private endowment, which will offset the county's lost tax revenue. And then some of that private land will stay private and it'll go towards local economic development. So whether that's real estate, timber, local businesses that are looking to expand somewhere. Um, it seems like a pretty good deal all around. I think almost every party involved in the area is supportive of it, whether that's Idaho County, which is definitely not a big public land commission. The Nez Perce tribe is supportive. Some of the conservation nonprofits are supportive. It's not an exchange, it's a willing seller sale. And the Forest Service is all for it. So this project is being funded in the 2027 Land and Water Conservation Fund budget, which takes oil and gas revenues and uses it to purchase new public lands. But it needs Senate support to close. So we sent a letter, I think it was last week, the week before, to Senators Risch and Crapo, urging them to kind of protect and shepherd the $54 million dollars that the appropriations bill has to fund this exchange, or not, sorry, not exchange, to fund this sale. This land is really important for kind of the river economy up there, protecting big game habitat, anadromous fish habitat, some of the things that are really core to our industry. So we'll have kind of, I think there's a PowerPoint as well as our letter of support are linked in the newsletter. Encourage folks up in that area to check it out. It's definitely an interesting project. I think a good example of like collaborative conservation and kind of how people can figure out these creative solutions that I hopefully works out to keep everyone happy and whole. So yeah, hopefully see that move forward and good example of ways that we can work together.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one because it's just such a great example of collaboration and sort of long term creative thinking and commitment to something.
Hmm.
And to see, I haven't had to learn a lot about it because you just look at the list of people who support it and it's like, oh, it's literally everybody. Okay, well, in that case, we probably don't oppose it. So the more I have kind of dug into it, though, the more interesting I think this solution is, and the more impressed I am that these people were able to pull this together. So it's really cool, but we do need to get it across the finish line. I mean, the Land Water Conservation Fund, but is just top to bottom, like that's something we want to support and make sure that that keeps moving forward. So this is great. All right, getting to our last couple things here. The Salmon Chalice rack is recruiting new members. So basically Salmon Chalice National Forest seeking members for its Central Idaho Resource Advisory Committee, which recommends basically what to do with the Secure Rural Schools funding, so SRS funding, about 740,000 or so this round for Custer, Lemhi, and Butte counties. These can be projects for forest health, watersheds, roads, trails, all sorts of things. There are 4-year terms with 4-year terms with a 2-term limit. Idaho residency is required. Applications are due by August 16th. This would be a great seat for any one of our members who, if you live in that area, everything else, but having some outfitters and guides in this space and helping dictate where this money goes would be awesome. So I'd love to see some folks from around there in the outfitting and guiding community get their applications in. We'll have a link to that in the most recent newsletter. So, great way to serve your community and potentially serve the industry and make sure these funds go to places that make a real impact. And then we're going to end on kind of a fun one. Idaho Fish and Game is looking for artwork. So they're looking for an artist to have their art go on next year's hard, little credit card sized, durable licenses. So they want artwork featuring cutthroat trout, steelhead, pronghorn, mule deer, or my personal favorite, and one that I hope some Idaho guide artist out there decides to get creative with, Geronimo the parachuting beaver. So
Nice.
I really hope that someone out here draws a great Geronimo and that that's what gets chosen for the durable licenses next year. 3 winners will get $1,000 each. Submissions are due August 31st.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna submit something.
let's show them
I
what we
gotta
can do,
break out my
guys.
crayons.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a fun one. Would love to see some of our great Idaho outfitter and guide artists get $1,000 and also have a sweet Geronimo painting or piece of art on those next year. All right, final thing here. Renewals for membership started July 1. So if you are an outfitter or a guide or a business that supports the industry or just a person out there who wants to support the industry, we have membership opportunities for everybody. Your membership allows us to continue to do the advocacy work that we're doing, both advocating for the industry, but also the natural resources that we all love. So make sure you kind of reach out. You can renew on our website. You can reach out to Hurty at the office, whatever works best for you. But now is the time to renew your membership and continue to support the advocacy work we're doing here for the industry and our natural resources in the state. Building on that, IOGA relies on the support of our members who go above and beyond just their membership. Thanks to our Dollars for Outdoors supporters, Cascade Rafting Kayak, Mile High Outfitters, McGowan Outfitters, White Cloud Outfitters, Bear Valley, Rapid River Outfitters, Soar Northwest, Bighorn Outfitting, Mystic Saddle, and Table Mountain.
Yep. And our dollars for salmon outdoor or and our dollars for salmon supporters, where your money goes specifically to support our work advocating for anadromous fish recovery, whether that's in DC, the State House, federal agencies, Fish and Game. So big shout out to Rapid River Outfitters, SNS, Canyons, Solitude, and Salmon River Drifters. And just a reminder, if you're looking at your renewals right now and you're wanting to get your membership bill down a little bit, DFO and DFS are a great way to offset your membership fees. So give us a shout if that's something you're interested in doing.
Yeah, yeah, Dollars for Outdoors and Dollars for Salmon. Pass-through donations can offset your membership dues. So that's a great way to participate in that program. All right, on to our interview. Jack, what do you want to tell people about the interview with Erik Barker?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good interview. Eric's obviously a guy that has a lot of insight into the issues that most affect outfitters and guides. He reports on kind of the environment and the outdoors, outdoor recreation for the Lewiston Tribune. He's been doing it for quite a long time, almost 30 years. So he has a really interesting perspective. He's also just, yeah, I think Eric, you said this earlier. He's one of the, I think, best reporters on these issues in the West. He's frequently breaking stories that other people are chasing. He's got a good insight. He has a lot of good sources. So definitely recommend listening to it, checking out his work for the Lewiston Tribune. And he has a newsletter, The Fish Wrap, that I've been a big fan of recently, where he kind of sums up a lot of the most interesting, most relevant outdoor news of the week. So check out the interview, go read Barker's stuff, and yeah.
Yeah, it's a great interview. I'm really looking forward for hearing what people think about it. So without further ado, here is the interview with Erik Barker from the Lewiston Tribune. There you go.
All right, Erik Barker, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here, man. Real quick, do you mind introducing yourself, kind of the work that you do for our audience here?
Yeah, no problem. I'm Eric Barker, the outdoors and environmental reporter for the Lewiston Tribune. Uh, it's a job I've been doing, creeping up on 30 years now in this position, and it's kind of like it sounds. I cover the outdoors, outdoor recreation. We have an outdoor section that comes out every Sunday. I try to keep that mostly recreation oriented, but I'm also the environmental reporter. So I write stories for the daily edition of the Lewiston Tribune that largely focuses on like natural resources, public land management, um, public that sort of thing. So it's very similar, but they're a little bit different. There might in the day-to-day reporting, like today I'll be writing about a lawsuit launched by some environmental groups challenging the Trump administration's changing of harm under the Endangered Species Act. So, and then I just do a lot of other
Yeah,
things for the Tribune too. We're a small staff, so fill in here and there.
cool. Yeah, it sounds like you sit kind of right at the nexus of the things that outfitters and guides care about, or especially that I care about. So you've been doing this since I think you said the early '90s. What were the issues of the day when you started out?
Yeah, so I started I think '97, and they're pretty similar. I mean, salmon and steelhead had kind of just been listed not too many years, so that was going hot and heavy. Wolves were fairly new to Idaho. There was talk at that time about doing some grizzly bear reintroduction in the Selway Bitterroot. Those things were really big, and then there's just natural, how do we best manage the public lands? Idaho has there's mostly public land, so there was a lot of that sort of news too. And if that sounds familiar, we're still talking about the same things largely today, maybe in a little bit different ways. I mean, the issues have evolved a bit, but they're pretty similar.
Yeah, it does sound like some pretty big through lines there. Um, well, hopefully we're making progress. I don't know if you see that at all, or feel like we're just kind of rehashing the same conversations over and over again.
No, I think we're progress is an interesting word. The stories aren't the same. If you take salmon and steelhead, and I know we're going to get into that a little bit, but I'll just maybe foreshadow it here. I mean, when I started, and for the most time I've been doing this job, the argument about what to do to save salmon and steelhead, of course, it's revolved around the Snake River dams. But basically, it was both sides of the argument sort of trying to convince the federal government to make a recommendation to Congress, either to keep the dams or to breach the dams. That's, in 2019, Representative Mike Simpson came along with his proposal, and that sort of elevated it above that level and kind of put it, before Congress, even though there was never really any legislation. So, it's changed in that way. Wolves were brand new, super controversial. I won't say that they're not controversial now, but I think in Idaho we've sort of gotten used to them a little bit.
Hmm.
You could probably still start a fight in a bar by talking about wolves, but they're sort of normalized on the landscape, and how we manage them is sort of normalized. So even though it's the same issues, there's some differences in how we talk
Yeah.
about them.
Okay. Sure. That makes sense. Yeah, you mentioned salmon and steelhead, and I know you've been covering the policy debate around the lower snake for a long time,
Yeah.
but you're also a fisherman yourself, right? So you kind of have this high level and ground level view. So I'm wondering if you could kind of talk a bit more about the changes you've seen over the years, both, in the larger conversation, but also out on the water.
You know, one change, if you just take spring Chinook, when I first started, it was almost, it'd been a while since we'd been fishing for spring Chinook regularly. Like we kind of expected it to do it every year. Um, I don't remember which year it was, but probably somewhere close to 2001 when we had the massive run. I remember, the outdoor personality, fishing personality, Buzz Ramsey came here and held a spring Chinook fishing seminar, kind of teaching us how to do that. Well, you wouldn't need to do that today. I don't know that you needed to do it then, but we know how to fish for them, and we expect to fish for them every year. Now, some years we don't really get to, or it's open and then it closes before it really gets hot. So that's changed a little bit. And like I said before, just where the debate is about how we best keep these critters around has changed. It was elevated by Congressman Simpson, and then again by the Biden administration. I think that, they really took an interest in advancing salmon recovery, and then we had the Trump administration come in and still trying to figure out, where we are now. Obviously, not in the same place as we were 2 years ago, but I think it'll take a while before we figure out where the issue is. It's in court. We know that, and that's sort of a familiar place.
Yeah. Well, I maybe want to ask you your opinion, just if you could crystal ball it.
Yeah.
Where you see that issue going in the next 20 years.
20 years. I don't know about 20 years. I think we're going to be in court a lot in the next few years. It does seem like presidential politics does matter now on this issue. Whether that will change or not, I don't know. I think we're sort of in a holding pattern. It's really hard for me to predict where we'll be. I think everybody hopes that we'll have some luck in the issue, and we'll have some ocean conditions and in-river conditions that help these fish, because they really are struggling in some spots. And how long can you tread water before something goes really badly? So, but I don't know in 20 years. Hopefully, we're in a better spot.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I think with the litigation that's ongoing right now, how that plays out and how that affects the politics going forward. The other thing I've been kind of thinking about is like the rise in energy demand in the Northwest and how that might affect that, whether it requires a bunch of new resources or, changes how we think about dams altogether. I think that'll be interesting.
I think you're right about that. It wasn't too many years ago when, one side of the debate was saying that we had energy surplus here in the Pacific Northwest, and AI and data centers and a growing population that sort of evaporated pretty quickly. So the energy piece remains as complicated as ever when you're figuring out what we're going to do for these fish.
Yep. All right. Moving on a little bit. Public lands, you mentioned this before, they're a big focus of your reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember right, I believe you were the first to break the news that Idaho Senators Risch and Crapo were going to publicly oppose the Mike Lee sell-off legislation last summer. Is that right? I think that was you, right?
I believe so, yes. Yep. I was kind of dogging them at the time.
Yeah. I think we all were. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to ask you what kind of stood out to you during that fight. It was obviously a big, one of the bigger public conversations and public backlashes we've had around public lands in the last few years. So, yeah, what's your take on that?
I think, it was just the affirmation that the public cares about the public lands a lot. I think we all knew that going in, but just the avalanche, tidal wave, whatever you want to say, of the public, and public of all stripes, really, getting involved and calling their members of Congress, even their state legislators and their governors, and just inundating them with demands that they, protect public lands and oppose the sell-off. I shouldn't say I was surprised by it, because I think we all knew that was there. We've seen it, we've seen people that are sometimes on the different sides of policy debate come together over things like land exchanges in much smaller pieces. Like up here, we years ago, we had the proposed Locksaw land exchange that united people, left, right, recreationists of all stripes. Saw that on steroids with this, man. Everybody just came together, and and they, I think, made a lasting impression on the political leadership. I mean, Senator Risch and Senator Crapo were instrumental in stopping it, but they weren't at the forefront of it. I mean, they weren't out front like Simpson was, and Zinke and other members of Congress from Montana. They really kind of, I think, were responding to the public, and so that's what stands out. And I think it was a pretty important reaction from the public. Oh, is that?
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, you guys were, I think, right in the middle of it, probably, and your members were concerned with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think seeing that, how many people from all different corners of the
Mm-hmm.
state and all different walks of life were concerned about it. And, you know, it's interesting, I think, seeing how we can all have this variety of disagreements about management of public lands
Yeah,
and squabble over, you know, what gets done here, what gets done there, what designation this area has or not doesn't have. But at the same time, like that underlying value is still there. And yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about this too. I wonder how much the boom in outdoor recreation that we've seen in the last few years plays into that passion. Um, so, did you see a difference versus I think it was 2016 when Jason Chaffetz was trying to sell public lands versus
yeah.
last year? Was it kind of similar? Did you feel like there was a new groups coming into it?
Um, I'm not sure about new groups. I will say the volume, I think, was turned up this year for sure.
Yeah.
It was just louder. And, one interesting thing to me is, like I said before, it was a wide spectrum of people who love public lands came together and demanded that this, be stopped. There were two really influential things I think happened. One is the Wilderness Society published the map, the national map, that showed all the eligible lands. So I think that really got the public's attention. But two, I mean, as we know, this was in the reconciliation bill, right? So the Democrats were against it already. So the fight really was trying to convince enough Republicans to oppose this. And a lot of times, so I think the hunting community was especially influential. It's really hard to wrap your arms around the demographics of the hunting community. I think it's diverse, but I think it probably definitely leans right, leans Republican. And so I think it was important that people like Senator Risch and Senator Crapo and others, they were hearing a lot from people that were their people, that probably their voters. And,
Yep.
if it was just members of, the Center for Biological Diversity or something flooding phone calls, it wouldn't have mattered as much as people that aren't involved in politics every day, just regular Joes and Jills calling in and angry and demanding that they stand up. And so that stands out to me as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think at one point, a staffer in Senator Risch's office had told us he said they had about 16,000 contacts from the public on this issue, which is, maybe 3 to 5 times more than they would get on any other hot button,
Right?
even controversial issue. Um, so yeah, it's cool to see. I do hope that
Ooh, hold on.
passion. Oh,
My lights went
oh,
out.
it fell.
I'm going to try to figure it out here, but bear with me. I'm down in it. We have a podcast studio now. Oh, okay. I hit a motion
There you
sensor.
go. Just got to move your hands a bit more when you're talking.
Yeah. All right. Wonder if that helps. Nope. Okay. Proceed.
All right, we'll just crop that out. Okay. I'm just going to move on to the next question because I forgot what I was saying. But so, kind of getting back to the broad sweep of history here, curious how you've seen public land management change over time. You know, and obviously that's a big, complicated topic, but thinking about things like staffing, wildfire, public access, outdoor recreation, things like that. If there's anything that stands out to you.
Well, I think what's going on right now stands out to me. We're seeing some pretty big shifts. This administration came in, and we had the whole Doge thing, and if we just kind of look at the Forest Service, which I talk a lot to the Forest Service. They manage a lot of public land up in my neck of the woods, and over the broad sweep of my 30 years, almost 30 years in doing this, there's sort of been a slow dwindling of the capacity of land management agencies like the Forest Service. And then after Doge and firing of the temporary workers and then deferred retirement and kind of encouraging other people to leave, really took a big drop. So now I think it's a massive issue, and I think there's real question about what the capacity of agencies like the Forest Service and others, NOAA Fisheries, all of them will be with fewer people on the ground. And we look at I've talked to Outfitters and Guides Association a lot over the last little bit about chainsaws in the wilderness, right? That sort of, there's a couple things that built the problem of blocked trails. I mean, some of it was just nature, disease outbreaks, wildfires, but also just the shrinking of trail crews on national forests. I mean, every ranger district used to have at least one trail crew, if not a couple. And now it's common for them to share, 2 or 3 districts to share one crew, and it might just be a few people. And those districts now are they used to be 2 or 3 different districts, and now they're all sandwiched into one. So you have the Forest Service going through this reorganization process, and they want to be more efficient. They want to get more people on the ground. I'm skeptical if they can do anything but sort of tread water, keep up with where they previously were recently. So, I mean, I think just the staffing level is pretty big. It's a big change, and I don't know where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah, the reorganization, I think, is maybe the biggest open question at the top level right now. And, I'm interested to see where it goes. It seems like one of those things where the devil's really in the details.
Yeah.
It could provide some of these benefits that they are saying they want, but it could also be extremely chaotic and end up, hampering the agency. So yeah, how are you understanding the reorg? How are you thinking about it? What are the things you're watching kind of that moves forward to make sure it's going to be successful?
Well, whether it does what they say they want it to do, which is to get more action on the ground, more
Yep.
people working at the district level, less people working in regional offices. I think I just said this before, but will they actually be able to get more done, or will they just be able to keep doing what they used to be able to do before they lost a lot of employees? That's one I'll be looking at closely. And 2, just how getting rid of the regional offices and replacing them with state directors. I'm really curious how that's going to play out. Who are those state directors going to be? Are they going to be sort of long-term Forest Service employees, as was the case with regional foresters? What sort of influence they'll have? I think that'll tell us a lot.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see who ends up in the kind of state office here in Idaho. From what I've read, they're intending it for it at least to be like career experienced
Yeah.
senior executive service people, not political appointees. But
Yeah, that's my understanding too, but I want to see it.
yeah, yeah. All right. What about wildfire? I know that's something that's really important for the state, and for a lot of folks, especially up in kind of the timbered areas of northern Idaho. Have you seen that change?
Um, you know, I've seen a lot of emphasis and a lot of funding trying to come up with solutions to it. I don't know that anything has worked as well as they want it to work. You know, it does seem like fires are getting bigger and more intense. And, you know, I tend to think that it's something we're going to have to live with for a while. I mean, there's, you know, it sounds trite, but there's no silver bullet, obviously. Um,
Hmm.
I, I don't know. There's been a lot of effort. I think, you know, some of the promising things I've seen is really trying to be smart around communities, um, do some, you know, some thinning and fire reduction work in the WUI, on the edge of the WUI, um, wild urban interface. I'm sure most of your listeners know what that is, but doing that sorts of things, I think, is encouraging. Um, you know, there's been talk forever about using prescribed burning better, and it just, I think, is proven really difficult for the land management agencies to put in place. I mean, you can do 100 good projects and do really good stuff, and if one of them goes haywire, it's, you know, that's all anybody thinks about and hears about. Um, so
Yeah.
I think there's potential there, but I don't know. It's wildfires are going to be with us. You know, we live in fire country, so they're always here, always have been here. But yeah, we're going to be in this intense period, I think, probably for a long time.
Yeah. That seems right. It seems like you need a suite of solutions to bring to bear on the issue, not just, not just management, active management, or more logging, or, name your pet solution. It's going to be kind of some combination of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when the Forest Service has sort of gone back to the 10 a.m. policy, I don't really call it that, but they've gone back to suppress every new
Hmm.
start, sort of, and that sounds great this time of year when there's a lightning bust in August, and there's, you know, hundreds of new starts across 3 or 4 states. Then
Yeah.
Mother Nature kind of takes control, and so uh, you know, I think it's, yeah, we're here. We'll be here for a while, and hopefully we'll get smart about the community stuff. Um, you know what I was saying before about the capacity of the agencies, and that's something we're going to talk about a little later on too. Um, is just I think that, you know, the Forest Service, the BLM, other federal agencies that do this kind of work. I mean, you have to have people in the positions and doing it, and so I think we need a commitment from Congress and from administrations to be fully staffed if we're going to make a dent in, you know, not just wildfire but any of these issues.
Yeah. Yep. Um, okay. Well, next question here. Um, So I mentioned this earlier, but Idaho's seen a pretty big increase in outdoor recreation the last few years, mostly since COVID. Most of that's happening on public lands.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you're aware, and I think as outfitter and guides are really aware of, there's some real benefits to that. You got economic growth, there's hiring competitiveness for, firms in the state, quality of life, but there's also some real challenges around travel management, overpopulation, overcrowding in certain areas. I'm wondering if you have any insights on how we can manage and continue to grow that sector of the economy, because it's not going away. It's really key to Idaho's economic future, but it also maybe needs some more management.
Yeah, I'll go back to just the immediate thing I just said is, man, we've got to fully staff these agencies, and not just fully staff them, but the recreation programs. there needs to be a priority behind them that matches, with vegetation management, with fire. Um, People in your industry know this, but uh, just take the average person. Their most intimate interaction with federal land is playing on it. It's going fishing, it's going rafting, it's hunting, hiking, backpacking. Um, and the Forest Service and other federal land management agencies spend a lot of time, I think, on trying one on fire, and then two trying to reduce fire risk through management. And sometimes it feels like recreation kind of gets forgotten about. I think we need a robust funding of the recreation program. And I think we're seeing it, especially with trails. People are getting involved themselves. I mean, there's, the Idaho Trails Association, Selway Bitterett Frank Church Foundation, Backcountry Horsemen, and even smaller groups are pitching in and helping. And to me, that's encouraging to see. I think we're going to need to see kind of more of that stuff. You mentioned the overcrowding. God, that's a tricky one. I think in Idaho, we're pretty fortunate yet, it's still, you're still able to get out in a way, but if you've been doing it a while, it does seem crowded. Um, if you look at hunting, Idaho Fish and Game is trying to do stuff, but it's tricky, right? I want to go elk hunting every year. I want there to be the possibility, I always want to draw a tag. Um, but if I don't, I just want to be able to get that over the counter tag, and I'm not sure what the solution is as more and more people look to participate in it. I mean, you have what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, like staffing and
Hmm.
and just bringing more resources to bear on the problem. And I think getting the agencies, both state and federal, to take recreation seriously, sometimes is a challenge, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that is funding, right? Like it's a carrot, get them to pay attention to the thing. Um, Something that I've been thinking a lot about is how to get the outdoor recreation community kind of bought in a more serious way to land management funding. So, I mean, like you mentioned, buying a tag, right? If you're a hunter or fisherman
Hmm.
in Idaho, you're paying into the system with your license, with your tags, everything like that. But if you're a hiker, backpacker, skier, mountain biker, there
Yeah.
isn't a parallel system for that. Um, and so, I don't know the answer to this question, but trying to figure out ways to bring those people into the fold, I think it would benefit the land and kind of the recreational infrastructure, and it also make those people a more active constituent in the agencies to get the agencies to kind of take their concerns and the things that they need out of the land more seriously. So that's just one part of the problem, but something
Yeah.
I've been stewing on.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, you're talking about basically a backpack tax or something like that, which
Something like that.
I think that would be cool. That'd be more buy-in from everybody. Congress has a role to play too, uh, properly funding these agencies, but the agencies too, they do have some, discrepancy in how they spend their money. Congress doesn't dictate how you spend every dime, so I think the agencies themselves need to prioritize recreation,
Hmm.
everything, trails, campgrounds, wilderness, all of it.
Yep. I lost you there for a second, but
Yeah,
looks like you're back.
yeah, you glitched out a little bit too, so we'll work through it.
But yeah, I think you're right. And as far as agencies go, something I learned recently, the BLM in Idaho, their biggest oh
Keep going, I hear you.
the BLM's biggest economic sector in Idaho is recreation. I think when, the BLM has a reputation as being the Bureau of Livestock and Mining, but here in Idaho, it's not fully the case. So, um, all right. curious if you could talk a bit more about kind of the work of journalism that you're doing. I'm wondering if you could speak to, the challenges to reporting on public lands in the outdoors in this day and age. Obviously, there's a lot going on. It's complicated, multifaceted issues, but you seem to keep up on it pretty good. So,
Well, thank you. Time is a big one. Talked about the federal agencies retracting and shrinking. My industry has done the same thing. So, everybody at the Tribune is wearing more hats right now than they used to. That includes me. So just getting the time to really drill down in some of these issues rather than, do coverage that's inch deep, mile wide kind of thing is one. Dealing with some federal agencies is really difficult right now. Post Doge, it's just not the same. I used to just call people up in the Forest Service. I knew who I needed to talk to. I had relationships with them. They would answer the phone. They would answer my questions. They wouldn't have to go check with anybody. And that's different in the last 2 years. I definitely have to go through a spokesperson. Most of the time it gets elevated to the National Press Office, and you get just like a generic statement back from them that is tangentially related to your question, but not exactly. And there's a lot of times no opportunity for follow-up. So that's really difficult. Like, it's just really opaque now inside some of the agencies. The Forest Service seems to be the worst right now, but I think there's reservation, in all of them. People are just really careful.
yeah,
That's a
I'm
real
sure they're
challenge.
taking in, yeah, sure they're taking inbound from every which way too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's important to hold those agencies, and the political appointees accountable. And I think we all want agencies that are more responsive. And I believe that journalism's a pretty key part of, holding federal government and other units of government accountable. So, what can people do to kind of support the local journalism that you and others are doing, to make sure we have that reporting coming out of Lewiston or out of Boise or otherwise?
Uh, it's pretty simple. Subscribe to your local newspaper and to the Lewiston Tribune, whether it's your local or not. I'm serious. That helps us. All the for-profit news organizations, of which the Tribune is one, depend on subscriptions, depend on advertising. There's great not-for-profits out there as well, Idaho, Capital Sun, and others. So one, subscribe when you can. Two, read, follow, engage. If you're not seeing the coverage that you want to see, let someone like me know. Say, hey, what about this? Sometimes the squeaky wheel really does get the grease. We depend on tips too. I'm not like financial tips, but information tips. Like, hey, I heard this. That's hugely important. So if you're seeing something that's not covered that you want covered, let someone know. And again, subscribe.
All right. Well, you heard it, folks. Tip your guide and your reporter. Awesome, Eric. Well, last question for you. I'm just curious, where are your favorite places in Idaho to go and be outdoors and enjoy?
I was thinking about this the other day. I was just flipping through my gallery on my phone and just photo gallery, and man, just Idaho's water is it just blows me away. Like the rivers, the creeks, the streams, just so gorgeous. So I just it's just great whether you're rafting the lower salmon or if you're lucky enough to be on someplace like the Middle Fork or the Selway, or even just back someplace like Kelly Creek or up on the Locksaw throwing a fly. Man, it's just awesome. And then just the country around them too, like chasing chuckers above the Snake River and Hell's Canyon, those kind of places. I mean, Idaho is so diverse. it's crazy. Even my little neck of the woods up here, we call it North Central Idaho. We kind of see ourselves distinct from what people call North Idaho and from Southern Idaho. But we've got, Hell's Canyon and Salmon River Gorge, just these sort of arid, dry river canyons. And then we've got the coastal disjunct forest up in the Clearwater, where you just have these big ferns and cedars and just really wet country and just everything in between. So I really do like the neck of the woods that I live in, but got the big sagebrush deserts of southern Idaho and the big, the sawtooth white clouds, those kind of ranges. I love all that stuff too, but nothing better than being on Idaho water, whether you're fishing for salmon and steelhead or cutthroat trout or anything really.
Awesome. Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. We truly do live in an incredible place.
Absolutely,
All right.
man.
Well, thanks a lot, Eric Barker of the Lewiston Tribune. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tip your reporter and your journalist and your
Yeah,
guide.
give us news tips. Visit www.lmtribune.com. You can find a link there for newsletters. I write a weekly newsletter called the Fish Wrap, where I kind of go over the week's news, outdoors news, and kind of give a little insight analysis behind the scenes too. And that's part of the journalism we do. And even if you can't subscribe to the newspaper, you can subscribe to the newsletter. That's free. So I'd welcome you to do that. The Fish
All
Wrap.
right. Fish Wrap. Check it out.
Right
Eric
on.
Barker, thank you very much.
You bet, Jack. Good talking to you.
You too. Okay, and then it just takes a second to finish uploading, but
Okay.
should be.
All right, thanks to Eric Barker for taking the time to chat with us. If you do not subscribe to the Lewiston Tribune and your local paper, if you don't live in Lewiston, please do so. Also sign up for Eric's newsletter. Local journalism is super important, not just on sort of the macro level for our society, which it is, but also for our industry. Eric is one of the best outdoor reporters in the West, holding those in power to account, and it's really important for us. He keeps doing what he's doing. Thanks to all the outfitters and guides in Idaho who were in the field working hard and sharing our incredible state. We hope you're having a great season, creating incredible memories for your guests and for yourselves. Reach out if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes. You can reach me at Erik, E-R-I-K, at IOGA.org. If you like this episode, subscribe. Tell your outfitter and guide friends, or just people who, weirdly enough, like listening to things about the industry. And most importantly, if you're not a member of IOGA, please consider joining, or if you are a member, it's time to renew. It's the support of our members that allows us to continue our work advocating for this community. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
2 more weeks till Angry August, folks.
See you later.
Hold it together.
Angry August is around the corner. You guys got this. You can make it. All right.